Hey, what up guys? It's the Tominator. So a while back I came across a video on RX Muscle where Dave Palumbo was talking with Chris Aceto. These are some big names in the industry, so you should probably know about them, but in case you don't, now you do. So anyway, they were actually breaking down a comparison of Ronnie Coleman versus Dorian Yates, two of the biggest and baddest Mr. Olympias of all time, probably the two best backs ever as well. It's a good video, you should check it out. I'll put a link in the description. Obviously, this footage you see in the background is not it. This is from the 2004 Mr. Olympia. And hopefully many of the points I'm about to make will become apparent as you watch this first routine. But if not, no worries. I've got some more tailor-made clips from other years where you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So let's back this up for a second. The reason I bring up this RX Muscle video is because Chris Aceto made a very interesting point when they were discussing these guys' presentation. He claimed that Ronnie basically ruined the sport with his half-assed posing routines. You know how he'd just kind of come out there and do his whole raise the roof thing, maybe bust a couple crappy dance moves and hit some most musculars and shit. And while this might be a bit of an exaggeration to say that Ronnie Coleman single-handedly ruined the sport, I don't think that's fair to say at all, but I do think that there's at least a bit of truth to what he's saying here. Because prior to Big Ron, every previous Mr. Olympia always had a well-choreographed routine. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but to my knowledge, even Dorian pretty much always kept it professional up there. Ronnie was the first to kind of just start winging it and having fun up on stage like that. And while that's not a bad thing necessarily, because it does showcase his personality, so this is the sort of shit I'm talking about right here, but it did kind of pave the way for others to start neglecting the posing side of things as well. To the point where today, a well-thought-out, properly choreographed routine is almost unheard of. These guys don't really seem to care about the transitions or the music selection anymore. They switch songs every 30 seconds like it's a damn nightclub or something and just hit the same like 3 or 4 poses over and over again. It's just become super basic. There's very little creativity on display these days, with a few notable exceptions like Kai Green and Cedric McMillan, of course. But then again, part of the problem is that the modern day bodybuilders are simply too big and massive to pull off all the aesthetic poses of bodybuilders from the golden era. I think we all realize that. And part of the blame also has to fall to the judges and the judging system for not placing enough importance on a polished and artistic posing routine. But I do think that Ronnie, as an 8-time Mr. Olympia, is especially culpable here. You might say that he's the one who made this sort of lazy performance acceptable. So I think that in that sense, he kind of did steer bodybuilding in the wrong direction. But anyway, let's play the next 2 clips and you'll see what I mean.
Ronnie also one of the strongest bodybuilders I've ever witnessed on his unbelievable video. It is actually unbelievable the amount of weights he's throwing.
Mind-boggling. Even close to a contest. Trains heavy right up to it.
Tell me what you think about me. I keep a bag, yellow hammer, keep to the heat. And I got a candy 84 on 3. And I keep these on beat, just get on their knees. I feel so hard, I was pick up.
It really leaves you speechless.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not a whole lot that you can add to Ronnie when you see him posing. What can you say to describe what you're seeing?
Coleman screwed up the sport because Coleman could get away with, coming up and doing no routine and just like raising the hands to the roof and wanting to hear people's, and then everyone thinks they're Colemans. You know what I mean?
Ronnie thought he had rhythm, but he didn't. He couldn't dance at all, nothing.
Now, don't get me wrong here, guys. I think Ronnie Coleman's a great bodybuilder. I'm not trying to start like a Ronnie hate train going on here. So if you watch some of my past videos, you'll know I've given him all sorts of high praise. At his best, like how he looked in 1998, 99, the 2001 Arnold Classic, and 2003 Mr. Olympia, I think he's simply unbeatable. In fact, I even deem him to be the greatest bodybuilder ever, even putting him over Schwarzenegger. I mean, when you factor in just how dominating he was in such a competitive era, and how incredibly well developed his physique was in almost every aspect. But he certainly wasn't flawless, we all know that. For all his strengths, he had a couple of glaring weaknesses, and we're not just talking about the subpar calves and midsection. We're talking about impact here, legacy. Quite possibly, he may have actually left the sport worse off than when he started. Again, is Ronnie himself to blame for the current state of affairs with all these bubble guts and poor posing? I don't think that's fair to pin it just on him. To a large extent, this shit was probably inevitable. But did he kind of pioneer these things and make them more acceptable by the fact that he kept winning all those years? Yeah, I think so. When it comes to the posing, I really can't think of another Mr. Olympia who set a worse example than him. Again, we're talking strictly about the individual posing routines here, because Ronnie was actually pretty fantastic in most of the mandatories. But then again, even when it comes to the routines, I think Chris Aceto exaggerated a bit here again. Because Ronnie always did do a rehearsed routine at the start. He'd typically pose in a more or less conventional fashion for the first couple of minutes, and then at the end, that's when he'd throw in all the goofy shit like the lame dancing and bouncing around to the beat. So personally, I don't have a huge problem with it. I think it's kind of silly at times, but then again, it worked for him. There's no denying that. In fact, Chris Aceto said the same thing immediately after, but I cut the clip off early because the audio started getting choppy. But he basically stated that despite Coleman not really having a real routine, it still worked for him because his muscularity was just so insane, especially from the back, that people were still impressed and cheered for him nonetheless. The problem was, other people started copying his style, but they didn't necessarily have the monumental type physiques like he did to get away with it. So anyway, that's the video, guys. Hopefully it provided some food for thought for you. Do you agree that Ronnie kind of ruined the art of posing? Or would you say it was somebody else or something else entirely that led to the decline of the more traditional posing routines like what we used to see in the 70s and 80s and most of the 90s? Let me know in the comments below, and please give the video a like if you enjoyed. Also, feel free to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And until next time, homies, I'm the Tominator, signing off, and I'll be back.